honorable guest today, the ambassador of Kingdom of Norway, dear guests, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. Today we are here for a lecture by His Excellency on Norway's worldview on the challenging world environment. Ladies and gentlemen, Pakistan and Norway are into great relationship since 1947. As a Scandinavian country, Norway is admired for its strong social model, cultural heritage, and breathtaking natural landscapes. Within Europe, Norway stands out for combining economic prosperity with environmental stewardship, maintaining one of the highest standards of living in the world. Internationally, Norway is recognized as a peace broker, a champion of human rights, and a leader in sustainable energy and climate action, giving it a great influence all over the world. Norway established its first embassy in Islamabad in 1976, preceded by an honorary consulate in Karachi. Norway also maintains a consulate in Lahore now. Over the past 75 years, our relationship has matured into a robust partnership enriched by people-to-people exchanges since 1960s. Pakistan and Norway hold bilateral political consultations at additional foreign secretary level, and from 2024 onwards, both sides have agreed to convene these conferences on annual basis, alternating between the capitals. Our cooperation spans a wide range of areas to include energy, climate adaptation, green shipping, protection of vulnerable communities, and promotion of human rights, while also engaging in constructive dialogues on regional and international concerns. On the economic front, our partnership is steadily growing. Pakistan exports textile, leather goods, and agricultural products to Norway, and in return, Norway exports fertilizers, machinery, aluminium, and steel to Pakistan. Telenor remains the most visible Norwegian presence in Pakistan since its establishment in 2005. Although it's winding up its businesses from Pakistan now, but it has invested $2.4 billion in the past 11 years in Pakistan. And today it serves nearly 40 million customers and is the second largest telecommunication group operator, mobile operator in Pakistan. Other Norwegian companies like Scatec Solar, Juten Paints, Werner Group, Bukhari, that is Norpark International, and Nok Textile have also invested in Pakistan in solar energy, paints, retail, and textiles. These ventures create jobs, transfer technology, and deepen our economic ties. Development cooperation is another form and a cornerstone in our relations. Norway began bilateral development assistance to Pakistan in 1969, even before opening its embassy in Islamabad. Between 1969 to 2022, Norway's total bilateral aid to Pakistan amounted to 5.3 billion Norwegian kron, which is over $500 million. In 2022 alone, Norway provided 130 million Norwegian kron, focusing on education, women's rights, gender equality, human rights, food security, and climatic adaptations. Norway also stood with Pakistan in our times of need, providing humanitarian support during devastating floods of 2022. Norway's contributions have also supported the preservation of cultural heritage sites, the strengthening of democratic institutions, and the protection of vulnerable communities. These reflect Norway's commitment to human dignity and social justice. These values are deeply shared by Pakistan. Our cooperation extends to law enforcement as well. Together, we have worked in combating human trafficking, drug smuggling, money laundering, etc. Ladies and gentlemen, as we look ahead, Pakistan-Norway relationship stands on strong foundations of mutual respect and practical cooperation. By expanding trade, deepening climate and energy partnerships, and strengthening our collaboration in education, governance, and law enforcement, we can ensure that this friendship grows even stronger in the years to come. I will now request the worthy guest speakers to please address us all and educate us on Norway's view on the changing world environment. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Lieutenant General Majid Ihsan, Hilal Imtiaz, Military President of IPRI. Thank you for the invitation. Excellencies and other distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. Let me start by expressing my gratitude to IPRI for inviting me to deliver remarks to such an august audience this week, while world leaders and diplomats gather in New York for the opening of the 80th session of the United Nations General Assembly. The backdrop is, to put it mildly, challenging. In his opening statement yesterday, Secretary General Antonio Guterres warned that we are entering an area of deepening divisions, rising mistrust, and unprecedented risks. He spoke of a world lurching from crisis to crisis, wars and conflicts, climate breakdown, growing inequality, and new technologies advancing faster than our ability to manage them responsibly. He urged leaders not to sleepwalk into a dangerous future, but to find common solutions to shared problems. I could not agree more. At a time when the multilateral system faces such stark tests, the view from Norway is that the same anchors that served the international community and my own country well as the moorings of our foreign policy yesteryear, post-1945, continue to be the right ones for the years ahead, mutatis mutandis. International law and the international legal order, multilateral cooperation, human rights, enhancing the UN's capacity to build peace and prevent and resolve conflicts, disarmament and non-proliferation, maintaining the UN's capacity to prevent and respond to humanitarian crisis and promote international cooperation on refugees and migrants, and advancing the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. In short, the view from Norway is that we need more cooperation, not less. And we need collectively to strive for greater adherence to and consistency in the application of international law. This as opposed to turning away from the post-1945 international legal order. The United Nations was born out of the ashes of the Second World War. In the spring of 1945, representatives of 50 countries met in San Francisco determined to prevent the repetition of a conflict that killed more than 70 million people. They sought a world grounded in international norms and rules, respect for self-determination and territorial integrity, and a prohibition on the threat or use of force in international relations. From those deliberations came the UN Charter and a new international organization, the United Nations. The Charter catalyzed the development of a modern international legal order. The Geneva Conventions and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights followed. In Europe, the Council of Europe was established to safeguard the rule of law and prevent arbitrary abuses of power. The Marshall Plan spurred reconstruction, while new institutions, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, and the European Coal and Steel Community, the forerunner of today's European Union, nurtured cooperation and growth. Today, Norway works closely with the EU through the European Economic Area. Security arrangements evolved in parallel. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, was founded on the Charter's inherent right of self-defense. In trade, the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, the predecessor to the World Trade Organization, set out to reduce barriers and promote open rules-based commerce. The United States played a pivotal role. Without President Roosevelt, there would be no UN. Without President Truman, no NATO. The United States accepted the burdens of stewardship, and the combination of its economic weight, military capability, diplomacy, culture, innovation, and aid contributed very significantly to the emergence of the modern legal order. By no means perfect, and honored in the breach as often as not, the norms and institutions that were built after 1945 on balance serve the international community well, helping to avert a global war and enabling unprecedented, if uneven, economic development and prosperity. In 2025, Norwegian foreign and security policy continues to be anchored in the UN and international law as the foundation of a rules-based world order. Norway has consistently worked for a better organized world. As a founding member, Norway helped shape the UN structures and goals. Over the decades, we have contributed to peacekeeping operations and to specialized agencies devoted to humanitarian relief, human rights and development, as well as to international financial institutions such as the IMF and World Bank. The UN system and its funds and programs need reform, to be sure, but to dismiss or seek to dismantle the system altogether is misguided, we believe. The WTO's multilateral rules-based trading system has served Norway well and underpins both Norwegian and European trade policy. The WTO, too, needs reform. And in Geneva, Norway is spearheading efforts to try to build consensus for just that, having very close and productive interactions with the Pakistani mission to the WTO in Geneva as they do so. Norway is currently a guest country in the G20 for the second year running. My pages are blowing away. Under both the Brazilian and South African presidencies, we have promoted the view that all benefit from a rules-based world. As a guest participant in the G20 and more generally, we strive to be a principled, credible partner of the so-called Global South. We strive, we try, we think we do okay most of the time. We rely on you to tell us when we don't. Norway was actively engaged in developing the Sustainable Development Goals and remains committed to the 2030 Agenda. The Paris Agreement is another landmark. Norway stands by its climate commitments. We have played an active role in peace and conflict resolutions in many regions, a role the government recently reviewed in the white paper, which is also available in English, and we can provide links later. The need for peaceful conflict resolution is only increasing, and Norway will remain a supporter and facilitator. We are also a long-standing advocate of arms control, nuclear non-proliferation, and the reduction of nuclear arsenals. At the same time, our security and foreign policy continues to be underpinned by the recognition that Norway needs strong national and collective defense within the transatlantic alliance, with the United States as the key guarantor of our security. Our security policy balances reassurance and deterrence. Reassurance means building confidence with neighbors, including self-imposed limitations on Allied military activity on Norwegian territory in peacetime, no foreign bases and no nuclear weapons on Norwegian soil in peacetime. Deterrence at the same time requires a credible defense posture with modern air, naval, and cyber capabilities integrated into NATO's collective defense. A well-trained military underpinned by the concept of total defense that links civilian and military preparedness helps deter aggression and respond to hybrid and conventional threats both in the high north and in the broader European theater. These threats, unfortunately, are real. Many of you will have noted the deliberate and irresponsible Russian provocations experienced by a number of NATO members just these last few weeks, in the form of violations with fighter jets and drones of the airspace of a number of European states. The NATO summit in The Hague in June was a great success and solidified commitment of mutual defense between all alliance members. All members agreed and committed to a target of 5% of GDP for defense spending by 2035, of which 3.5 will go to military spending and 1.5 to civilian support to defense. Norway is on track to reach this goal by allocating 3.3% for defense spending this year, including military support to Ukraine, which is substantial. Norway recently adopted a new national security policy and a long-term plan for defense, which outlines the road to achieve this goal. Norway is geographically far away from Pakistan, high up on the map, and the high north is our most important strategic priority. The government recently presented a new Arctic strategy that prioritizes resilient northern communities, total preparedness, population and business growth, and an enhanced defense posture in the high north, where to the northeast, Russia is our neighbor. We have a common border with Russia. We will continue to support the Arctic Council as the primary forum for multilateral cooperation in the region. During Norway's chairmanship, the Council retained all 8 member states, including Russia, alongside indigenous representatives and observers. Preserving this format is a crucial priority seen for Norway. Allies are paying growing attention to Arctic security. Norway has long argued for a higher Arctic priority within NATO. This is now happening, and the Arctic was one of the topics discussed at the meeting of NATO foreign ministers last week. The rules-based international order is under pressure, with overlapping challenges: brutal wars in Europe, the Middle East and beyond, renewed great power competition, rising polarization fueled by disinformation, multilateral institutions paralyzed by mistrust, growing barriers to trade, weakened arms control regimes, and the existential threat of climate change. What makes for an effective foreign policy in this challenging world environment? In the Norwegian analysis, sustainable peace and stability and solutions to global threats and challenges require broad engagement, stronger and more robust international law, and rejuvenated global institutions. With us, as I said at the outset, believe that we need more international cooperation, not less. And cooperation must rest on shared rules, the body of international law and norms that has served the international community and Norway well since the post-war period. Able to trust that our neighbors will not attack us, we invested in rules-based trade and productive development. This served us well, as I noted, and so we would still argue firmly today that all states, not only small ones, benefit from a world ruled by law, not by force. NATO's founding treaty, for example, is anchored in the principles of the UN Charter. It remains an entirely defensive alliance. As such, and unfortunately, it remains as important and relevant as ever, given the belligerence and aggressive behavior of our neighbor to the northeast. International law is under pressure from actors who seek to profit from discord or unpredictability. Norway therefore promotes a principled foreign policy that rejects double standards. Violations of international law are unacceptable, regardless of who commits them, which rules they break, or why. Following rules only when convenient or turning a blind eye when they are broken, whether by friendly and partner, even if it is friendly or partner nations that break them, erodes the normative power of international law and ultimately harms our own interests. Among the greatest and clearest threats to international peace and security today remains Russia's aggressive war against Ukraine. Russia's unprovoked aggression against Ukraine began with the occupation of Crimea and parts of eastern Ukraine in 2014 and escalated into full-scale invasion in 2022. The gravest threat to Norwegian and European security since World War II. It is also a flagrant violation of the most basic principle of international law, the sovereignty of states. Legally speaking, this is as black and white a situation as it is possible to think of. The illegality of aggressive wars of conquest is a principle that all UN member states, including Russia, have signed up to. There are no ifs and buts about it. And so therefore, after my now 4 years as Norway's ambassador to Pakistan, it remains a matter of considerable disappointment to me that so many friends in and out of government here, for all sorts of ill-defined and convoluted reasons, continue to refuse to call this particular spade a spade. We can draw a direct line from diminished respect for international law to Norway's most urgent security interests today. Russia must not prevail in Ukraine. If it does, the norm against attacking other states will be weakened, potentially emboldening further aggression. The world would become more dangerous. Norway is clear where it stands. With Ukraine, which has international law on its side, and we will be there also when it is time to rebuild. Pakistan, I very respectfully submit, could and should have been clearer about being on the right side of this conflict. To repeat, there should be no double standards. That's the Norwegian view, at the very least. Hence, just as we have been clear about the aggression against Ukraine, we have been so about Gaza. If you care about international law in Ukraine, you must also care about it in Gaza, but also vice versa. We condemn the atrocious 7 October attacks by Hamas in the strongest terms. They were acts of terrorism of the worst kind, carried out by a terrorist organization. The Israeli government responded harshly to the terrorist attack. The war between Israel and Hamas in Gaza has since given rise to a humanitarian catastrophe with an unspeakable level of human suffering and devastation. Tens of thousands of people have been killed, the majority being women and children. Humanitarian workers are being shot at, journalists are killed, children are starving to death and experiencing atrocities no child should ever see. Last week, a UN-mandated independent commission concluded that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza. Norway has been crystal clear from early on about the unacceptability of Israel's conduct of the war in Gaza. We continue to be so. Just yesterday, our Prime Minister, Jonas Gahr Støre, expressed in New York our deepest concern about Israel's current expanded military campaign. In 2024, Norway initiated the UN General Assembly resolution that requested an advisory opinion from the International Court of Justice in The Hague on Israel's obligations under international law. 137 countries voted in favor of the resolution, and in May this year, public hearings commenced before the ICJ in The Hague. In Norway's statement to the ICJ, when the hearings commenced in May, and in the UN Security Council, Norway emphasized that Israel is obliged to provide the UN and other humanitarian organizations with full access, and that humanitarian principles must be upheld. This includes ensuring that aid is needs-based, impartial, neutral, and reaches people in need. Last year, some of you may recall, Norway also recognized the state of Palestine. Our rationale for doing so was to extend a hand and encourage those on both sides of the conflict to seek a peaceful solution. In New York this week, we observed that international support for and recognition of the State of Palestine is gaining momentum. We also observe that the overwhelming majority of member states now consider the two-state solution as the only credible basis for peace in the Middle East. Peace for Israelis and peace for Palestinians. The suffering of the Israeli hostages and the Palestinian civilians in Gaza is sadly not the only instance where the failure of states and other actors to live up to their obligations under international law is causing large-scale death and calamity. In Sudan, the humanitarian crisis is among the worst in the world and risks leading to de facto partition. The continued existence of these calamities and tragedies in Norway's view is no reason to give up, however, on international law, including international humanitarian law. Instead, the solution must be to redouble our collective efforts to ensure greater adherence in the application of international law. Greater consistency is a must to ensure such adherence. Whether in Ukraine, in Palestine, or in Sudan, it is illegal to invade and occupy another country. It is illegal to deliberately bomb civilians. It undermines international law when states operate with one set of rules for their friends and another set of rules for everyone else. This is not in Norway's interests, and we do not believe it is in anybody else's interests either. This is why we are clear about the rules that apply and the need to comply with them, even when war is raging. This is the message that we convey consistently, and we speak up against violations of international law, even if our friends are involved. When international rules work, they rarely make headlines. The global trading system is a case in point. It continues to enable goods, services, and capital to move efficiently across borders, driving growth and development. Just short of 72% of world trade still happens under WTO conditions. Yet the trading system is under severe strain. We face the most significant setback for global trade since the Second World War. Protectionism and trade barriers are back. Trade policy is increasingly used as a bargaining tool, even among formerly like-minded partners and among allies. Terms like regionalization, de-risking, and friendshoring have entered the lexicon. Tariffs on today's scale risk weakening the global economy and threatening jobs. In trade wars, everybody loses. In the short run, through inflation and higher interest rates. In the long run, through fragmentation and slower growth. The WTO's multilateral rules-based system has served Norway well and remains the foundation of our trade policy. And we will stand by and seek cooperation with partners who share our interests and values to defend rules-based trade. In an age of social media, misinformation, exaggeration, and fake news, misinformation, exaggeration, and fake news can fuel prejudice, hostility, and us versus them thinking, shrinking the space for dialogue. Norway's approach recognizes that the world is too dangerous to engage only with those who share our views. We believe in engagement, even, and sometimes especially, with actors whose record on human rights and international law we strongly contest. We have maintained dialogue with the Taliban, the Houthis, and other armed actors, including Hamas. This has occasionally put us at odds with Western partners, but we consider it the best path toward a more equitable and peaceful order, and toward greater security at home also. And so we see this not as naivete, but as realpolitik. The influence of non-Western countries internationally is growing, and that is a good thing, you might say. The days when the West could design solutions and expect others to adopt them are over, if there ever was such a time. Durable solutions must reflect the world as it is, and talking to all actors is in our self-interest. Sometimes that means compartmentalized relationships. With China, for instance, we cooperate closely on climate and the green transition, including a new formalized dialogue, while continuing to voice concerns about human rights and to exchange views on areas of international law, for instance, where we have differences of opinion. In other cases, we have engaged when others will not. Afghanistan is a case in point. Norway continues to condemn the Taliban's repressive policies and dismal human rights record, especially against women and girls. Yet we also believe that any effective strategy must involve structured dialogue with the de facto authorities of Afghanistan. As early as 2006, while participating in international coalition operations against the insurgency, Norway established contact with the movement to encourage a political process. Over time, we facilitated communication between Taliban leaders and the then Republic, acted at times as a conduit between the United States and Taliban, and hosted some quiet regional dialogues. We were among the few countries present at the Doha talks from September 2020 until the Taliban takeover in August 2021. Since then, we inter alia have hosted meetings between the Taliban and Afghan civil society and women's organizations at the request of Afghan participants, enabling dialogue on humanitarian access, human rights, and women's participation. This connects to a broader principle. All states, regardless of their political, economic, or cultural systems, have a legal duty to promote and protect the human rights of all persons without discrimination. A country is not truly free and democratic unless it guarantees that all citizens can live free, independent lives. The Norwegian view is that more often than not, direct engagement with regimes and groups we strongly disagree with and criticize is likely to be more effective in promoting the cause of human rights than non-engagement. Talking with and engaging adversaries, or those we disagree with, is critical to solving global challenges, but it is insufficient without a shared global normative vocabulary. At the same time, preserving and developing that vocabulary requires acknowledging a basic reality. The current order, global order, is rightly often perceived as tilted against the global south. Norway takes those concerns seriously. It is untenable for rules on taxation, climate, or artificial intelligence, for instance, to be developed without all countries present at the table as equals. The unrepresentative nature of the UN Security Council starkly exemplifies why institutional reform must be at the top of the international agenda if multilateralism is to endure. Norway, I think still in 2025, is the world's largest per capita donor to the multilateral system. Our commitment to the UN remains a mainstay of our foreign policy, and the UN will continue to be a key arena for our broad engagement. We recognize, as many others do, that the UN is facing its most serious crisis in 80 years. For one, the gap between ambitious development and climate goals on the one hand, and declining global financing on the other is widening, fueling tensions between wealthy countries, emerging economies, and developing countries. Global disarmament and non-proliferation are other areas where we are seeing discord and a crisis of confidence. Against the backdrop of heightened geopolitical tensions, disarmament efforts are unfortunately losing priority. This makes it more important than ever to safeguard the disarmament agreements that do remain intact and to prevent the spread of nuclear weapons. The Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty is and will continue to be the most important of these agreements. The UN system is facing a period of major change. The organization must reform, and it does seem inevitable at this stage that its ability to deliver on the ground will be reduced. Nevertheless, Norway will contribute what it can as a friend and partner to try to contribute to reform efforts enhancing the effectiveness and efficiency of the organization. At the same time, our engagement in the UN and other international bodies will focus just as much on preserving existing rules and preventing the weakening of existing obligations in this area as on establishing new rules. It is important not to lose sight of how much important and beneficial international cooperation has been built under the auspices of the UN and other bodies since 1945. More than 560 international agreements. These today still constitute the edifice of international law, an edifice Norway continues to believe it is vitally important to work to preserve. As global cooperation comes under pressure, regional organizations gain importance. Norway works actively to strengthen our dialogue and cooperation with leading regional organizations. Thus, Norway cooperates closely with the African Union and has strong bilateral relations across Africa, reflecting shared interests in both economic opportunity and security. For the same reasons, we are also deepening ties with ASEAN, an increasingly central forum of the world's most populous continent. Excellencies, dear friends, before closing, let me turn briefly to the bilateral relations between Norway and Pakistan, and where the Honorable President said most of what I was planning to say about the very good state of bilateral relations between our two countries. I've had the honor of serving as Norway's ambassador to Pakistan for the past 4 years. During this time, I have been reminded almost every day that the bond and friendship between our nations run deep. In 2023, we celebrated 75 years of diplomatic relations. On that occasion, our Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Støre highlighted the arrival of Pakistani migrant workers in Norway and the remarkable contributions of the Pakistani Norwegian diaspora. More than 40,000 Norwegians today have Pakistani roots, and they have made significant contributions to our economy, society, and politics. Over the decades, cooperation between Norway and Pakistan has grown on the foundations of mutual respect, trust, and shared interests, sustained by extensive people-to-people ties. Since the first Norwegian developments in the early 1950s, as the President noted, our collaboration has spanned climate adaptation, women's empowerment, protection of vulnerable community, human rights, trade and investment, greener and safer ship recycling, and culture and education. Norway has long supported Pakistan's development, particularly in education, gender equality, and human rights. And we recognize the considerable progress achieved in a number of areas, including, for instance, in the increased enrollment in education for girls and a stronger civil society. At the same time, there are areas where, as friends of Pakistan, we would have hoped and hope for more progress, in line with commitments under the range of international human rights instruments to which Pakistan has signed up. When we raise these hopes and some concerns with the federal and provincial authorities, which we do so as friends, hopeful for and encouraging a further progress, reflecting the Norwegian view of Pakistan as a modern, vibrant, diverse, and aspirant nation with a young, talented, and deserving population. In my 4 years, I've also seen that we are not alone in having hopes of further progress in important areas for Pakistan and Pakistanis, it is clear. One of the things I appreciate most during my posting here in Islamabad is starting the day with 2 or 3 of your excellent English language newspapers. I much regret that I don't speak or read Urdu. Reading these papers, hardly a day goes by without one reading well-written op-eds by Pakistani authors on critically important issues for any country, including pertaining to the state of democracy, rule of law, independence of the judiciary, free and fair elections, freedom of expression, the protection of religious and ethnic minorities and non-minorities, and so on. When reading the op-ed pages, one cannot but fail to notice that the majority of writers, and the majority of them are Pakistani writers, contend that the country is failing in quite fundamental ways to live up to the aspirations of its founders in serving and protecting the rights and interests of all of its citizens, justly and equitably. What one reads less often, one similarly cannot but fail to notice, are equally well-written op-eds by politicians and other decision makers in positions of authority, making the contrary arguments. It's possible, of course, that the contrary arguments are being made, and being made equally well, in the Urdu media that many Western diplomats, such as me, fail to peruse equally closely. And if so, I'm certain you will assist and correct my understanding during the subsequent discussion, which I look forward to. Looking ahead, Norway is committed to deepening our partnership and exploring new opportunities, including on climate and the green transition. As responsible members of the international community, we have a shared duty to promote sustainable practices, reduce emissions, and protect our planet for future generations. Pakistan's role on the UN Security Council currently adds an important dimension to our dialogue on peace, security, and international law. Every strong partnership involves celebration and honest conversation in equal measure. Norway's relationship with Pakistan is marked by respect, trust, and a willingness to engage constructively, even when we disagree. Let me end where I began, in the wake of the Second World War, and with words familiar to many Pakistanis. Shortly after independence, in February 1948, Mr. Muhammad Ali Jinnah set out the goals of Pakistan's foreign policy in a broadcast to the people of the United States. And I quote, "Our foreign policy is one of friendliness and goodwill towards all the nations of the world. We do not cherish aggressive designs against any country or nation. We believe in the principle of honesty and fair play in national and international dealings, and are prepared to make our utmost contribution to the promotion of peace and prosperity among the nations of the world. Pakistan will never be found lacking in extending its material and moral support to the oppressed and suppressed peoples of the world, and in upholding the principles of the United Nations Charter." Looking at this, looking at the world today, in terms of how our two countries view the world, I would say, coming back to the title, that Pakistan and Norway share a principled outlook, a worldview, if you like, on international relations and the importance of upholding a rules-based world order where all states are treated with mutual respect and sovereignty is respected. That, I would say, is an excellent foundation on which to build and deepen our bilateral ties and cooperation also for the future. And I contend, and I will close with this, our shared commitment to a rules-based order, international law, is also a strong anchor that should continue to serve both our countries well when navigating the current challenging international environment. I thank you.
Sir, thank you very much for such a comprehensive and insightful talk. Ladies and gentlemen, the floor is now open for questions and answers, and I request the audience to kindly keep their questions brief so we can take maximum number of questions. Sir.
Thank you very much, Excellency, for a very excellent presentation. In your presentation, when I joined, you were talking about the nuclear arms and arms control and Norway's role. I do agree that Norway played an excellent role while reducing the tactical nuclear weapons between the Russians and the NATO. Keeping from there, is it possible that Norway can play a role between India and Pakistan, because Norway maintained a good relation with both states, to mitigate the nuclear risk in the region? And second, how Norway is looking non-nuclear strategic weapons because of this emergence of a devastating technologies. Thank you. Non-nuclear strategic weapons. I mean the reference to the emerging technology.
Norwegian politicians and diplomats have a tendency to get in trouble whenever they are asked about and make the mistake of responding to questions about India and Pakistan. What I would say is that, and I mentioned, I think during the part of the talk, which you can maybe catch online later, I referred to the Norwegian government putting out earlier this year a white paper on sort of continued engagement in peace negotiations, mediation, facilitation, and conflict resolution as a priority of Norwegian foreign policy. I think a key principle, we try not to impose anywhere or on anyone. I think in our experience of some decades of trying at the margins to make a contribution in the field of peace and mediation, we have realized that for a facility, and most often we come in as a facilitator in a softer way. We never engage in sort of hard power mediation. We don't have the size or the tools for that. Others are better equipped to do so. But I think we've realized that you need consent, and you need actually both parties or all parties to actively want you to play a role. And, well, you know better than me the positions of the two parties in question on any sort of international mediation or facilitation. And I think I will leave it at that. I'm not an expert on non-nuclear strategic weapons and hypersonic weapons. I think this is an area that we are trying to follow very closely and with some concerns, because it introduces sort of new dynamics, potentially changing the dynamics of balance of power relationships, creates risks for strategic stability and so forth. So this, along with many other military technological developments, such as the rise of drones and so on and so forth, I think we are following this closely, trying to make sense of it, and trying to make sense of the risks, the implications, and the potential risks that these weapons, new weapon systems, introduce.
Thank you, Excellency. You talked about rules. You rightly talked about rules-based order and your assessment on it. My question is that, unfortunately, for the last decade or so, we are witnessing it's a rules-based disorder. The world is slipping towards it. And one of the recent examples is President Trump talking about taking over Greenland, which is your immediate neighbor in the Arctic. So what is your take on that, and do you think it will have implications for the Europe and beyond?
I mean, I think we're clear that Greenland is of course, we're concerned when we hear things like that. And we support the Danish position. I think that is all I will say on that.
Thank you, Ambassador, for a very comprehensive talk. I would like to invite your comments on the possibility of an independent European nuclear deterrent. Since lately there have been a lot of discussion around this particular aspect. Even some of the European countries like Germany and Poland have also indicated their desire to develop an independent nuclear weapon capability, which manifests their discomfort with the US extended deterrence. In addition, UK and France, despite having limited capability at the moment, have also pledged to offer coordinated nuclear deterrent for catering to the European threats. So how do you see this scenario panning out in the future?
Again, I will plead a certain amount of ignorance. This is quite it's not a question on which I have a lot of direct knowledge. I know that the strategic community in Oslo is following this discussion very closely. And we will have to see how it develops. I think we're a long way away from that. It doesn't seem very realistic at the moment. My government, I don't think, has not taken a position on whether this is desirable or not. But I suspect that it is not something we will be supportive of. Thank you.
Thank you very much, His Excellency. My name is Shafkat. His Excellency, my question about decline of US liberal democratic order, the rise of China. How Norway and what see the worldview on global changing world order, rise of China, basically.
Well, as I said during my remarks, it's clear that sort of balance of power, if you like, influence, and so forth, that there are shifts, and I said that we have to relate to the world as it is. We have a very close, in terms of political and diplomatic consultations, and in some areas cooperation, relationship with China. The United States remains our closest ally. We, of course, in general, think that dialogue and consensus is a good way of conducting international relations and trying to ensure stability and maintenance of the international order and peace and security. So it is what it is. And just as you, we and other European countries are trying the best we can to navigate in these unpredictable and sometimes choppy waters. I'm not sure that's a full answer to your question, but I will leave it at that.
Excellency, thank you for a wonderful discourse. My question or just an observation for your comments is that President Trump recently indicated the U.S. interest in taking over this base in Afghanistan, Bagram base. So, and obviously the government, the Taliban government, they are trying to resist it. So what will be your position and how the world community should react to this if there is a, development in taking over that Bagram air base? Thank you.
Maybe not a less fraught question, since you quote President Trump, but finally a question relating to something I may be more comfortable with and a little bit more knowledgeable about than new weapon systems or independent European nuclear deterrent or US-China, because I worked on Afghanistan for many, many years. I think it was a few years ago that de facto Foreign Minister Muttaqi spoke at the think tank here in Islamabad, and he set out the foreign policy doctrine of the de facto authorities in Afghanistan. With two main pillars. Balanced external relations with regional and international actors, and the centrality of economics, that they would focus on economic, trade cooperation, and so on. And more generally, sort of sovereignty has been a very strong underpinning of their narrative, whether one likes it or not, as well as Islam. And so it seems unlikely to me that everything the Taliban have said about what they stand for seems inconsistent with handing Bagram back to the United States, or anybody else for that matter. A few months ago, there was a lot of speculation about possible presence of another regional actor at Bagram. Now, obviously, I don't speak for the United States. President Trump does. We heard what he said. There was a Taliban reaction, which referred to the Doha agreement signed between the United States and Taliban at the end of February 2020. Having said that, many things are possible in international relations, sometimes on the basis of reciprocity. An Afghan friend quipped that, well, sure, if they invite a brigade of ours to Virginia. So I don't think it's going to happen in the short to medium, and likely not in the long term either. But I mean, one principle we do very much believe in is the freedom of states to choose their own alliances and their own alliance partners. This, of course, it's a freedom that isn't upheld everywhere in Europe at the moment, and is one of the causes of the aggressive war of Russia against Ukraine. If the US and the Taliban were to come to some sort of agreement, why not? Thank you.
Excellency Ambassador, thank you very much for a very enlightening discourse. I learned a lot, and always have been an admirer of Norway's principled stand. I wondered that Norway is also at the forefront of supporting the multilateralism and rule-based order in the world. And we also share this view because without a rule-based order, we have seen the destruction of the Second World War, which gave birth to the United Nations. But at the same time, this new world order created Cold War, caused Cold War, and then we saw there was a big struggle which culminated into dismantlement of the former Soviet Union, divided into 15 countries. So there was end of Cold War. There was, we saw United States emerging as the only superpower in the world. So it became a unipolar world. With this unipolar world, we also saw that during the Cold War, there were military alliances, Warsaw Pact and NATO. And when the Cold War ended, NATO had 12 members, which till last year, it has now grown into 33 members. I wondered what was the rationale once the Cold War had ended, why to expand NATO? What were the objectives? And now when you see the renewed, quote-unquote, Cold War, so does it lead us to believe that there would be more wars? May not be in a way that we saw in the Second World War, but the way those are unfolding in areas here and there in the geographical division. So does that mean NATO and then increase of NATO's budget from 2% to 5% is ominous? This budget is to be used against whom? Against the emerging quote-unquote rivals whose agenda is not expansionist or they don't entertain military ambitions. So I wondered that you, Norway being, and then since you maintain good relations with different poles of the world, so how you will be navigating through these, mines-infested road. So I wondered that if you can enlighten us about this aspect. Thank you.
Well, I've tried to address sort of the last part of the question during my talk, our security policy for many decades has combined reassurance and deterrence. The only reason why Norway is increasing its defense budget as much as we are, the only reason is the Russian invasion of Ukraine. If that is not expansionism, I don't know what is. But NATO was and remains a defensive alliance. So ominous, no. Cause for concern, no. I don't think so.
Excellency, my question is that China plans to test new shipping route to Europe through northern sea route of Arctic region, and also ready to cooperate with Russia for the development of Arctic region. What is your take on the emerging geoeconomics and geopolitics of the Arctic region, keeping in view the major power rivalries? Thank you.
I mean, you're quite right that this is an important new development. I said during my talk that sort of the high north and the Arctic region is a key priority for Norway and for Norwegian foreign policy. So it's something we follow very, very closely. I think it's too early to say exactly how this will play out and what navigation and passage in the Arctic will mean in practice and how. So we are observing, analyzing, and I think formulating policies and positions. But more generally, the principle of freedom of navigation will always be one that Norway very strongly supports and promotes.
Your Excellency, my question is about renewable energy. You are an oil and gas exporting country, but your reliance on hydroelectric energy and wind energy is significant. So we'd like to know a bit about that.
Yeah, you're, in what sense? I mean, in what aspect?
Potential of wind energy and its cooperation with countries like Pakistan.
We, in Norway, most of our own electricity is hydropower based. We continue to export significant amounts of oil and gas, and oil and gas will be required as transition from coal and to greener forms of energy are used for quite a while longer, will be needed. There is one Norwegian company in Pakistan that set up and now operate a 150 megawatt wind plant in Sukur. It was the name of the company was mentioned by the president. The name is Scatec. We would hope that other Norwegian renewables actors would also be attracted to and wish to explore the energy sector in Pakistan. The wind and solar potential is considerable. At the same time, I think Norwegian companies, this is not unique for Norwegian companies, they don't always find Pakistan the easiest place to do business. And there are many reasons for that. Yeah, the Norwegian approach is, it's not top-down. We don't tell Norwegian companies, go and invest there or go and invest there. They have to assess the risks versus the potential gains on their own, as it were, and then make a commercial decision. Yeah.
Your Excellency, my question is leading from just what you said just now. Is related to the Norwegian assistance to Pakistan. About 10 years back, I was heading a Norwegian-funded project related to the Clean Development Mechanism. And I see
which development?
Clean Development Mechanism, you know, it was a UNIDO, being implemented by UNIDO. And I feel that there's a sort of a up and down in this Norwegian assistance to Pakistan. Is it due to the political instability here, or because there's a lot of opportunities for a lot of projects that can be done through this kind of an assistance? And we had an excellent project, worked for about 5 years and was able to build capacity in various institutions in this regard, you know. So there's excellent projects in environment, say there's human rights and a lot of other stuff, but I see a sort of a roller coaster thing, and it looks like it's due to the political conditions in the country. Is that a fair assessment?
Well, no, I don't think so. I mean, I can understand why it appears like a bit of a roller coaster, but I think the reasons are fairly straightforward. As I think it was the president who noted that actually Norwegian Development Corporation with Pakistan started before we opened an embassy here. And I think it's fair to say that for a number of decades, sort of from the Norwegian side, the development cooperation was one of the main facets of the bilateral aspect. And our embassy here became sort of a development cooperation embassy more than anything else. But over the last sort of 20 years, development assistance as such, I would say, has tapered off steadily for a number of reasons. Pakistan graduating to become a lower middle income country being perhaps the main one. That's a category of countries where, from Norway, but on the part of many other donors, there is then less development assistance allocated. Also, we have, for Norway's part, we are now channeling sort of a greater part of our development assistance not to individual UN funds and programs at the country level, but capital to headquarters in the form of larger umbrella or block grants, which it then is for the individual organization to, as it were, parcel up and distribute to country programs and projects that they decide to prioritize. So trajectory has been downwards, and I'm afraid it's going to continue to be downwards. There was a spike because of the terrible floods in 2022, which caused sort of more humanitarian assistance to be put forward. But I don't think it will be too long before development cooperation is possibly no longer part of the bilateral relationship. Not tomorrow, not in, as it should be, as Pakistan grows and develops.
Thank you so much, everyone, for your engaging questions. I would now like to request President Dipri to please come on the stage to present memento to our honorable guest. Ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to the conclusion of today's session. Thank you, everyone, and please join us for tea on my left. Thank you.